Hi, it's Kevin May, Editor-in-Chief of PhocusWire here. So, Erik Blachford, Venture Partner at Technology Crossover Ventures, welcome. Thanks for joining us, Erik.
Happy to be here.
Why are you happy to be here? Not right here now, but generally in this conference, because, you know, it's a man of your profile and history in the investment world. You turn up at somewhere like this and people think, okay, but you've made some personal and some investments through TCV, but what is it that's exciting you about this sector in particular?
Well, you know, it's just we're always looking for the next big thing. I mean, I guess that's sort of obvious, or the new thing, as the man would have it. And right now it sort of feels like in online travel, a lot of the kind of obvious stuff has been done. A lot of the information that was sitting there in servers trying to get free, be it airline tickets, hotel reservations, whatever, it's kind of been done. And then you've got this interesting new world that's enabled by mobile technology, mostly, where you've got the tour and activities world is just changing as we go. And it's not just the way that people book stuff, it's the actual experience on the ground too that's changing. And that's, when that kind of change happens, usually there's money to be made. So we're looking at it.
And is there anything in particular within the sector that excites you? I mean, there are some investments that have been made already.
Yep.
But is it on the kind of the intermediary side that interests you, or is it on the vendor technology side, or are you fairly open-minded as to what might be a hot prospect, as it were?
Well, in a situation where everything's changing, it usually pays to be open-minded about where you want to play, and so we take a good hard look at things. It seems to me that there's probably two big things that are changing. One is the way that people discover things to do in destination is changing pretty quickly, and you're seeing that TCV made a big investment in Klook. On the personal side, I made an investment in a startup called Viable, and the idea here is people are going to find that different platforms are going to offer up the kind of activities that people like them want. I don't think the tour and activity world is going to become like a winner-take-all market the way that transportation has. There's something fundamentally different from calling up an Uber who's going to drive you from point to point, because I don't really need to know anything about the driver other than that they're safe and background checked and so on. They don't need to know anything about me. We don't even really need to have a language in common. But if you're going to walk me around a town, or you're going to cook me a meal or something like that, we've got to have some way of knowing that we're sort of right for each other. And I'm not talking about travel Tinder here exactly, but
well, maybe that is the next big thing.
Maybe that's the next big thing.
Eureka.
Anyway, the other side of it is I do think the way that people experience the destination is going to change forever, because it's all mediated through the devices now.
Yeah.
And so whether that's because they're on an autonomous vehicle that's taking them around instead of walking around with a guide, whether it's because there's a new kind of augmented reality that's giving them a sort of an earbud style walk around a neighborhood, that experience is changing too. So there's the discovery side and also the experience side.
Now, you've seen in other sectors, or in travel, other parts of travel, lots of startups come and go. Travel doesn't have, let's say, an incredibly high track record of businesses that have gone the distance. I think that's fair.
I think that's fair.
Do you sense that in this particular sector that it's going to face the same kind of issues as the startups in other sectors have done?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So yes, I think that for the companies that are trying to become really big breakout companies, I think that there's going to be a very high mortality rate. I do, because it's so difficult to get demand in an efficient way, and that over and over again has been proven out in travel. And now that you've got the big OTAs, especially, spending so much money against any kind of intent-based marketing, be it search engine keywords, even Facebook ads to this extent, their margins are so big, they're so good at it, it's really hard to compete against that. So I think for the companies who are trying to become really big, I do think it's going to be really, really difficult. On the other hand, though, I do think that the tour and activity world is going to look a lot like, say, the adventure travel business, in that there's enormous opportunity if you want to build a good, sustainable, kind of human-sized business. And so I do find myself saying a little bit, small is beautiful when it comes to this category, because you can build a really nice business for yourself. It might not be Expedia down the road, but it might actually be a really nice business that leads you to a great lifestyle and has a really good time.
But TCV has invested in Klook, and that's one of those companies that does have to compete against those giants, because it's getting people in the front door.
Yeah, well, so for TCV, what we do is we like to come and invest at the fairly late stage. We're not early stage. We don't make that first investment. We tend to make investments that are further on once a company has shown that they've actually been able to break free of the pack, and Klook is certainly one of those. Now I think, our thesis there is that geographically, obviously their footprint in Asia is fantastic. It's a great base to expand from. So we feel really good about that. But that's a company, I would say, that has already solved a lot of the challenges that a startup, like a 5-person startup today, they look at something like Klook and feel like, well, how are we going to get there?
Right. Okay. How do you think they would get there if you were one of those businesses looking at it?
It's interesting. It used to be that I would say, well, they got to master all the basics and so on. And I think that is true, but I tend to still think that it's an inventory-led environment, right? Okay. If you can get supply that's going to be attractive to a certain demand segment, and you're going to get in there either first or better or faster, you've got a really good chance of blowing things up. And it's less about the marketing, and it's more about the supply you put in place, and then how clever you are about getting your existing customers to spread the word, and working all the angles with the press, with travel influencers. It's a different sort of world than it used to be. It used to just be raw money. Back in my day, starting Expedia, you got Priceline hires William Shatner and puts $100 million against it, and we all look at each other and go, oh, it's about money. Oh, okay, we can all do that. And it was all television advertising, right? And it's just a different game now. You can't really start up on that basis. Now you got to be a bit more clever about it.
So, what's your general view about Airbnb has spoken here today, and it's fairly young in the game. It's only 2 years in. Yeah. But they're coming at it from a host experience type thing. But you sense people are thinking here, either I can work with them, or their hosts are going to be a threat. Or do you think, as Douglas has been saying, there's just room for everyone, and it's just great?
Oh, so my take is sort of the third take on Airbnb, which is, I think Airbnb is this giant platform sort of informing everybody that it's now possible to have these local kind of experiences. And what's happening is they're training a whole generation of travelers. Okay. And so people are growing up with this notion that, oh yeah, when I land in Paris, I can find somebody to walk me around or find somebody to make me a meal or something. 5 years ago, nobody thought that, but because Airbnb is pushing it so relentlessly to all of their travelers, people are getting used to the idea, whether they travel with Airbnb or not, whether they use an Airbnb host or not for the experience, just the fact of knowing that it's available to them is the kind of thing that all boats are going to rise. It's not a limitless market, but I do think the Airbnb sort of bow is going to provide a whole lot of cover for a lot of independent companies coming after.
Okay, so just a couple more to finish up.
Yeah, sure.
The big acquisitions that happened earlier on this year with Booking and Trip doing their thing, what was your kind of general view on those and what it meant for some of the other, whether the vendors in the space already?
Well, so it goes back to, again, depends what your strategy is in business. If you're trying to build a sustainable business at a kind of a reasonable scale, you look at stuff like that and you think that validates the category for me, that trains people to know that people like me exist. If you're looking to build something at scale and hope to get purchased by one of the OTAs, I would think it makes you a little nervous, because let's face it, the OTAs all understand the category really well at this point. Expedia's been at it for a long time. Even back in my day, we were poking around the edges of it. They understand that it's there, but they're not going to make tons of bets. They're going to buy something and then they're going to build off that. So, my take on it is there's still room for several big independents to come out of this. Okay. I really do believe that this is the kind of thing where different big independent players are going to find their audience, and it's not going to be generic the way that some of the other travel categories are. Yep. I might point to. I don't know. I might point to somebody like, think about like One Fine Stay that were bought a few years ago by Hyatt, right? So those guys went after a particular kind of audience and they did really well, and eventually they went into the hotel brand, but they built a pretty good independent presence as being the high-end version of the kind of the home rental area. Yep. And I think you're going to see that kind of thing play out here in tourism activities as well.
And finally, Google's started taking an interest officially, rather than everyone just spending their money on Google. Google's starting to do its own thing. What's your kind of view on them entering the space and doing essentially what they've done in flights and hotels. You know, it's almost like command and conquer. You know, they invade one planet and do their thing there and move on to another one, isn't it?
Listen, I think Google's going to be enormous in this space. I think it actually plays to their strengths.
Yeah, but what does that mean for the OTAs that have been spending? Because at some point they're going to want to connect directly with all the suppliers.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So what happens for all those OTAs that have been helping fund it?
I think you're going to find that there's this ongoing tension between Google taking advertising dollars from the OTAs and from the suppliers themselves, and Google striking deals with the suppliers directly, which will probably be more commission-based. But I think those things can coexist. I think you see them coexist already in a lot
Well,
of
I mean, it's in
categories.
flights and hotels anyway.
Flights and hotels, but also as you look outside of travel, any place that Google can aggregate information, they're going to get paid through advertising, and they're going to get paid directly eventually too. Yep. I think you're going to see that play out in this space.
Okay, Erik Blachford, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, cheers.